Welcome, everyone. This is the fifth and final session in the five-part series Advocacy in Focus, presented by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Preservation Leadership Forum, and the Main Street America Institute. My name is Kelly Hummerhauser, and in a moment I will introduce today's presenters. After the conclusion of this program, you can, via your InReach account, go and take the final quiz for the five-session series. Completing all of the sessions and the quiz for each session will earn you credit to the Main Street America Institute's Leadership Development Certificate. We'll tell you more in follow-up emails about other opportunities to earn credit towards Leadership Development Certificate, including our upcoming online Leadership Development Workshop. We're taking it virtual this year, and we'd be pleased to have you join us. There will be multiple opportunities for that workshop throughout the remainder of 2020 and into 2021. So we encourage you to pay attention for those announcements to add to your leadership capacity. Getting started today, I want to introduce each of our presenters. So hold tight on some bios real quick here. First, I want to introduce Mike Phillips. As Director of Public Policy at the National Trust Community Investment Corporation, Mike Phillips specializes in organizing local, national, and federal advocacy initiatives. He currently works to secure congressional support for enhancement legislation relating to the historic tax credit, new market tax credit, and other community development incentives. Mike helps advocate, plan, and coordinate in-district state site visits with members of Congress and orchestrates DC lobby days on behalf of the Historic Tax Credit Coalition. He is quite an expert in what we're talking about today, so we're so pleased to have him here. Thank you, Mike. I'd also like to introduce Brianna Grosicki of Preservation Action. Brianna is also the Associate Principal at Place Economics, a consulting firm that works at the nexus of historic preservation and economics, known to many across the Main Street and preservation worlds. She serves as the chairwoman of Preservation Action, America's grassroots lobby for preservation, and on the board of directors of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. So pleased to have her here today and build on the content that we had previously had from Preservation Action. Very pleased to have that partner join us. And finally, I want to introduce Joyce Barrett of Heritage Ohio. Joyce began her career in the museum field and has served as the Associate Executive Director of the Arizona Historical Society, as well as the first Executive Director of the Iowa Historic Preservation Alliance. Joyce also has served as Heritage Ohio's Executive Director since 2007. In 2017, the National Trust presented the John H. Chafee Award for Outstanding Achievement in Public Policy to Heritage Ohio for its advocacy work on the federal historic tax credit and the deferred maintenance of our national parks. So we have a superstar team here today, and first up, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to kind of talk us through growing a grassroots network.
Great, thank you, Kelly. We're going to switch those slides up right here, right? All right. Well, I'll just start out with, connecting with your legislators is very important. The need for information from legislators or to legislators helps them inform their decisions. You have hired lobbyists in Washington. However, lobbyists can talk until they're blue in the face if they don't have if they don't have support from back home. That's going to be that's going to help. They are not going to be able to make the correct decision on behalf of their constituents. So what we'll cover today is understanding the value of creating grassroots advocates, knowing who these grass advocates are, and craft and target your advocacy communications for maximum impact. Next slide, please. So what is grassroots advocacy? So your legislators are relying on folks from back home to inform them on what is important in their state or district. And as I was saying, even the best lobbyists can make the case, but if there is little support from back home, the progress of that initiative is not going to get very far. Weighing in with members of Congress brings to life the national issues within a legislator's office. Ideally, you want to have a member of Congress that is very passionate about your issue in order to get the policy or effort over the finish line congressionally. You really need to have someone that's willing to take your issue on, fight for your issue, and influence their colleagues to pass whatever policy you are trying to move forward. Now, that's imperative to just have any type of victory, but if you really want to have a good chance of getting your policy passed, you need to have dozens of legislators passionate about your issue and willing to fight for your issue, bipartisan members of Congress, and then also, even if they're folks that are not as passionate, you need to have a chorus of folks saying that they agree with the issue and they are not against the issue, and allowing those that are passionate move forward in bringing to life this policy initiative. So how do we get the latter? How do we bring this outpouring of support on Capitol Hill? It starts in communities, it starts in localities, and it comes from states and then is brought to the national level. So your grassroots network and advocacy is what's going to orchestrate and coordinate these efforts to effectively influence government. Next slide. So how do we activate a broad group of individuals across the nations to unite in an effort with the goal of having dozens of members of Congress passionate about your issue and scores of legislators in agreement and a chorus that is bipartisan? Well, it starts with creating a network on the national level, state level, and local level. On the national level, folks in Washington or who are connected to Washington are able to keep the pulse of what's happening in Congress. Many times what's happening in Congress appears in the papers, multiple hours or days after something actually happens, and there lots of times is not as much anticipation of what's going to happen next. Folks on the national level can gain insight on the timing of things, what is moving forward, who needs to be influenced, and channel that down to the states and localities. Statewide organizing has the ability to activate localities and certain areas that are important. So when you do this on a national level of states activating localities, you have grassroots advocacy in action. On the local level, those are passionate local folks bring texture to what policy you are advocating for. And those local folks bring this three-dimensional picture to legislators on how this national policy is impacting a community. Next slide. So who are the people locally that are weighing in? Well, here's a good list. Mayors, community organizers, Main Street preservationists, business property owners, chambers of commerce, real estate, economic development professionals. All of these people have an expertise. They have a voice, and they can speak to a subsection of your policy that will enlighten your member of Congress of why they should act on your behalf. Next slide. So communicating with advocates. So I would say that a contact list is probably your most fundamental thing of having a grassroots advocacy network. That is how you are going to communicate with people. Those are the people that you consider advocates. Those are the people that you're going to activate, and those are the people that you are going to inform. When you have an advocacy network, it is important that content is key. So your content is going to keep everything together within your advocacy network. You're communicating with the members of your network, whether it's on a national, state, or local level. And I will also say that if sometimes you don't have state leadership, lots of times local people that are very passionate will take on the statewide aspect of the network and be the de facto state leader. So if you don't have a state leader, fear not, find a passionate local person. They will usually jump at the opportunity to grow this network. So regular information and timely information is the glue that holds everything together. Don't be surprised if when you are activating your network, you only have a couple of days to respond. Things move fast on Capitol Hill, and sometimes legislation was totally stalled, and then out of nowhere, you find out that they are ready to move and influence is needed on a particular provision. In an ideal case, you have months to, and even years to ramp up advocacy efforts. Working with the National Trust, we had 5 years to ramp up for tax reform. It was a good thing because it was a very, very tough advocacy battle. And we grew deep advocacy on behalf of the historic tax credit as tax reform emerged. We didn't have to create everything, create everything new as the tax reform bill was starting to ramp up. So also there's a few things that you could do to grow your network, and I know folks are going to talk about that later, but make sure you have some of these items built in, like encourage people to share information with friends, create online forums, do webinars, think of ways to grow, but also kind of take the shackles off people of your network to grow your own network. Just encourage them to say, hey, I want to duplicate myself other places, and I want you to help me do that. So I want to arm you to be successful and be a leader in your community, just like I'm a leader here providing you with this information. So the more you can duplicate leaders, the more successful you will have within localities and states and funneling up to the national level. Next slide. So grassroots tools. We'll go over a few items and types of efforts that can be helpful in your grassroots advocacy. So in-district meetings. So not everybody can make it to Washington repeatedly throughout the year. In-district meetings provide the opportunity to meet with a legislator's office, but also bring a group of individuals that would not be able to come to Washington. So you can have a broader, diverse, well-spoken group of individuals come and meet with a legislator's office to where you probably would not be able to duplicate that effort in Washington. It gives the ability to educate. It gives the ability to bring influential people in the community to a legislator's office. Ideally, these meetings should happen with a member of Congress, but they can be with staff of the local office as well. I think the key thing is within district meetings is to make sure that the follow-up is done and make sure the information, if the legislator is not there, and even if the legislator is in the meeting, you want to make sure that they're following up with the Washington staff and the staff person that handles that issue area. Make sure to make an ask to your member and make sure it's clear of what you would like the office to do, and it's not just a social gathering of stopping by and saying hello. Make sure that you connect that with your specific ask of what type of policy you would like passed in Congress. Next slide. So site visits. Site visits are another component of in-district or in-state advocacy. And many times that all of the other advocacy can kind of build up to a site visit in order to push an issue, because many times they're in the summertime or when the weather is nicer. During an August recess is a key time to have a site visit. What a site visit does is you're communicating information through email, through in-person meetings, through over the phone, and it's really what I call 2D advocacy. You're sharing with them information, you're telling them about it, but it's really up to them of what picture they have in their mind of what your advocacy is all about and what the policy is all about. When you do site visits, you're turning your 2D advocacy into 3D advocacy. You're painting a picture in your legislator's mind. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and you are able to put that picture in a legislator's mind when they think of your issue. So you can show different sites, you can show communities, you can show main streets, you can have them meet individuals in their site visit that can make the case on your behalf to show that you have a vibrant issue that is important to a community. And this is all part of an ongoing relationship in your advocacy, which should be your approach as you advocate, that this is a long-term relationship to be developed with a legislator's office. Next slide. So lobby days, events, and receptions. So lobby days have the ability to do a few things. If you can make it to Washington, you have the ability to meet with all of your legislators within a few hours, or even within a couple hours. You have the ability to meet with the staff person that you've been communicating with back home. And you also have to have an opportunity to learn who the people within an office that are making the decisions, and how you might be able to loop in and educate people that are maybe not in the forefront of your conversations into these other opportunities for advocacy. So as I was saying before, this is all part of an ongoing relationship. So you've been communicating with this person, you maybe called the office, you got the email of the staff person that handles this particular issue area, you've been sending emails, you've been encouraging people to send emails, you've done an in-district meeting, you've brought people that are influential in your community that this policy is important to, and now you're in Washington actually meeting in person with this person you've been communicating with. Can't tell you how many times when I am with advocates, you hear the staff person say, it's nice to put a face with the name. So now you're just building that relationship more, and you're no longer strangers. You are communicating, you've met in person, and you have the ability to be a resource moving forward. Next slide. So sign-on letters, that is an important mechanism of advocacy, in that sign-on letters give you the ability to let people advocate who care, who may not have the time or the knowledge to weigh in on an in-depth email with a staff person, or maybe they are a mayor and they have so many issues locally that they would not be able to engage directly on a particular issue, but they can sign their name to a letter, or you can help them write a letter with key points and talking points, and they can express their view of how this policy would benefit their community. So sign-on letters show broad support, and it's a light request. So asking someone to sign on to a letter is not really asking anybody to go out of their way, but it can be very impactful, especially if you can get a large enough letter or have a focus letter with mayors or economic development directors or even governors. Next slide. So intel is critical. So all of this feeds a cycle of advocacy. You may have a district meeting, you get feedback from that. You answer the question in a sign-on letter, you gain more feedback. You then set up the perfect site visit with the legislator. The legislator gives you feedback of information they would like to know. You have a lobby event, you bring that information and those project examples, and you gain feedback, and it's just a cycle that keeps feeding itself, and you keep broadening your network and broadening your advocates, and create a groundswell of support to hopefully pass the policy. And this goes on together in an orchestrated way from the national to the state level down to the local level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And now we'd like to hear from Joyce Barrett, who we previously introduced as the Executive Director of Heritage Ohio. Welcome, Joyce.
Hi, good afternoon. Heritage Ohio, our mission is helping people to save the places that matter, build community, live better. We were the first organization in the country to combine what we refer to as traditional historic preservation statewide organization with the coordinating agency of Main Street, which is a benefit that allows us to reach more people all over the state. Advance the slide, please. So our Main Street network, currently we have 22 certified Main Street communities and 35 downtown affiliate communities, which are at the junior level. All of these, if for board capacity building, we encourage all of our communities to ask the mayor or a city council representative and a county commissioner to be on the board of directors. That helps them with their funding and their capacity and their decision making within their community context, as well as it helps us build that political network in the long run. Part of the annual evaluation for our Main Street communities, they earn points by different activities. That includes visits with state representatives, state senators. We expect them to visit one-on-one with each of their city council people individually and their county commissioners. This builds a strong network for them locally. It helps build our network because those same people then go to the state house and then sometimes go on to Congress. So developing those relationships earlier in their career where they're intimately familiar with the projects we work on is very important. We got a state appropriation this past year for $500,000, which has gone back into investment projects in our Main Street communities. They're essentially required to tour their state rep and state senator and show them how that money was reinvested in their community. We also encourage them to do parades, use politicians in parades as judges for contests, silly or not. And as most Main Street communities have continuing education and networking requirements, that's also required of our Main Street managers, that we ask them, they get points to come to lobby days at the state level and meet again with the state representatives. Next slide. Historic tax credits are very important to the state of Ohio, and Ohio is a big state. But it's important to understand that when we do something, because we have limited resources, you try to get as much bang for your buck as possible. So on one hand, you want to teach everybody how to use historic tax credits. That's part of our mission as a preservation organization. But the other thing is the tax credit, the Ohio Historic Tax Credit, the majority of our General Assembly is run by rural representatives, where you're less likely to have the sophistication to use the historic tax credit. Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, that's fine. They aren't running the General Assembly. Those people have to be in favor of the tax credit. So what we've done over time is we've evolved. The blue dots are what we did tax credit workshops. Those were full day workshops with attorneys, accountants, and architects explaining how you use tax credits. They were all day. They were very fatiguing for the attendee. And so then we switched to what you see, the red dots, what we call historic tax credit coffees. That's a 60-minute presentation where we come into your community and very quickly give you enough information that you know whether you want to get more information. And we introduce you to the people who run the program so they understand state tax credits, federal tax credits, and the National Register, which qualifies them. 20 minutes each, 60 minutes, we're in and out of your town. But at the same time, we have the state representative or the state senator introduce us and say to their constituents, hey guys, I'm bringing you this opportunity. This is how we're going to rebuild, reinvest in our community. These are the tools. Let's learn about them. So we make friends in that small relationship. And also the economic development directors and mayors are involved usually in those just 60-minute coffees, which are very easy to do. We try to do 4 on a day, which means we do 16 visits a year. So 4 visits a year. And we have great partnerships with our SHPO and our development services offices. The green dots are what we call tax credit dinners, where we invite the representatives, the state reps and the state senators, along with the mayors and the economic development directors, to tour a project, have dinner, have drinks. We invite the representatives' wives. They've been very effective in building the friendships between these people and understanding how these projects are impacting their community, but I will admit they're a little expensive. One of the things that's been important to us maybe is we haven't been able to afford to hire a lobbyist, but some of the state representatives we work with have tried to assure me that being an honest broker and having, again, this grassroots people who care passionately about the topic is more valuable intel to them than having a paid lobbyist come in. So you can't, a lobbyist doesn't fix your problem. It might help enhance a more sophisticated network of information, but you still have to have this grassroots stuff going the lobbyist needs to work with. Next slide, please. One of the third areas that we work with is, this is really a heritage tourism project. Heritage Ohio partners with a state heritage area in the Appalachia region, the Ohio Hill Country Heritage Area. They're all volunteer run, but we partner with them to put on the Appalachia Heritage Luncheon once a year, and we choose recipients who do 3-minute success stories. And these are really fun, emotionally charged, exciting projects that people, places, and businesses are doing to change the Appalachia region. And we have the state rep or the state senator introduce their constituent, who then tells their 3-minute success story. And over the past 10 years, having a continual relationship with the state reps and the state senators one-on-one just through this luncheon has been really valuable. So now when I go to Washington, D.C., perhaps for a meeting, Congressman Troy Balderson, I worked with him for years at the luncheon, and he'll go, I know you. You know, you don't have to reintroduce yourself because you've had a good relationship working on small projects. So I think everything in our world, it's very much local relationships with the local politicians, who then usually grow up and are at the state level and continuing that relationship. And then so many people from the state house end up going to the national level. So there's no level that you ignore. You've got to create that basic relationship to begin with. So I think that's all I have. Next one.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Wonderful knowledge and words and excellent project examples. And now we'd like to re-invite Brianna Grosicki to talk a little bit about preservation actions work.
Great. Those were wonderful introductions. And the thing I took away from Mike's presentation was make your rep a champion of historic preservation. A great reminder. And Joyce, thank you for the reminder about developing relationships early on in the process. So Preservation Action is America's grassroots lobby for historic preservation. We operate as a 501c4, but we also have a partner organization, the Preservation Action Foundation, which is our 501c3. So other big groups that operate this way include the Sierra Club, the Women's March, the National Rifle Association. So it's an interesting model where we help, on one hand, educate the next generation of preservation advocates on our C3 side, and on the C4 side, help empower local grassroots advocates to engage with their legislators at primarily the federal level, but as Joyce said, all these skills and communication tricks that you pick up and the confidence that you build as you do this and get more practice translate to every level of government. Even if you have to go talk to your neighborhood board president, about a fence issue or whatever. So things I want to touch on today, the tools that Mike mentioned in terms of the insight visits, the in-district visits, the lobbying events. Preservation Action helps host some of those at the federal level for historic preservation. So every year we have partnered with other federal historic preservation groups, including the National Trust and the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers, to put on the Historic Preservation Advocacy Week. It happens in March most years. This year we squeaked in right before COVID hit everything. So we were actually one of the last groups in the Capitol before they shut the Capitol down, which was really exciting. Can we actually go to the next slide, Kelly? And the picture I have here this is our class of 2020 advocacy scholars. These ladies are either recent graduates or graduate students in historic preservation, politics, government, who are all interested in learning how to advocate for historic preservation on Capitol Hill. And we're so glad that we are able to revive this program. And I think for me, growing an advocacy and grassroots network really has to be about broadening your base. Think about including the younger generations. Main Street is actually built inherently great for this, because who's on your Main Street board? You probably have, a local business owner, maybe the guy who owns the video game store, restaurant owner, someone from the Chamber of Commerce. All this collective group of people who come from a variety of backgrounds already bring different perspectives, but they all care about the same thing, having a revitalized downtown and celebrating that. And all of that grassroots efforts that you put into your Main Street board really translate moving up the line of advocacy levels of government. So Preservation Action has a weekly legislative update. So our Associate Director, Rob Naylor, who's based in Ohio, reviews, what's happening on Capitol Hill and lets all of us know. He puts out action alerts, and that list goes out to almost 1,000 people every week on what's happening in DC. And that type of information that can come to me. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I can forward it on to my local grassroots advocates here in Savannah to let them know what's happening. We also, in preparation for Advocacy Week, have a system of state coordinators where we have a state coordinator for each state. So Fairleigh Jackson of Preserve Louisiana is the state coordinator for the state of Louisiana. So every year for Advocacy Week, she has to put together a team. Who are the grassroots advocates are going to come to DC and do these visits in the halls of Congress? And that's where really broadening your base and having a multi-generational and diverse group of people there who can speak to Main Street historic preservation, downtown revitalization, and how all these federal programs and federal funding can really make an impact in the district. Lastly, talk about Preservation Action also hosts a congressional briefing, which you could absolutely do at the state level or the local level. I've seen people host a breakfast briefing with their legislators. Rhode Island did that recently, where you get people together and you say, hey, here are the issues. Here's some accomplishments that we have made. Here are some legislative asks or changes that we're going to be asking for this year. And then follow that up with all the follow-up and the letters with everyone signed on. All those can be very powerful for your legislators. And I also want to remind you that they're people too. Like my rep here in Georgia, District 1, Buddy Carter, is a pharmacist. So I don't expect him to know a lot about the tax credit, but he certainly sees the buildings that have been turned around using the tax credit. So getting him on, getting on his schedule when he's in district, August recess is happening now. So be thinking literally this week, can we get a site visit? And if you can't get the legislator themselves, get one of their staffers. That's totally fine. They have the ear of their boss, and if you make a good impression on them and are persuasive to them, they will let their boss know, and you can continue advocating from then on. So yeah, I think those are the tools that I have.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And I'd like to invite all of our presenters back onto camera so that we can do a question and answer session. If you all are able to share video again, we can have a quick discussion about some of the best practices that you've presented on. If any attendees in the audience have a question that you'd like to chat in, we would love to answer questions. So please go ahead and use the chat function to type something in for the audience. We have a few minutes here. But I also have a couple of questions prepared. So based on some of the things that we've been talking about, I'm wondering, I think Brianna just touched on it in her remarks, but I would love to hear more from everyone about what the best methods and tools are to grow that base that we were talking about.
Well, I would say that anytime you have a forum or a gathering where people care, make sure there's a sign-up list, and then afterwards follow up and say, hey, I'd love to add you to my network. I mean, it's a lot of in-person. I mean, when we are meeting in person, there's opportunities to grow your list. And I would say you're interacting with people locally all the time, and just keep that on the forefront of, I want to loop you into this advocacy effort, and make that part of your regular conversation as you interact with people.
I'd also maybe add that I always like to think, as a board chair, my job is to, figure out what different board members' skill sets are and make sure they are applying those appropriately. So find the person on your board or on your staff who's really organized and can keep track of that contact list that Mike talked about. Like in Preservation Action, we literally have a list state by state. Who's the statewide? Okay, in Ohio, Joyce is head of the statewide, but who are all where are all the local towns that have a citywide preservation organization, who are Main Street, who are CLG, and have contact information for each of those people. So, if there is an issue in Ohio District 3, you know, we know who are the advocates on the ground. So it is a lot about organization. So find that type A person in your group and empower them to help you forward.
Joyce, anything to add?
I was just going to say, like Brianna's saying, have the list be able to split it up when you need, if you need a Main Street topic or a tax credit project or something like that. Sometimes you use all of it and sometimes you use portions of it. So have your list coded.
They're great, great tips. We do have a question from the audience that I think that Mike could speak to, and then I actually might provide a little bit more context here. It's what is the current outlook for calls to action that ask advocates to submit letters to electeds? And I think that the questioner is likely asking about both the improvements to the historic tax credit that are proposed, as well as perhaps the current Main Street ask. So Mike, do you want to begin to handle that, and we can all take a stab too?
Sure, I can handle the historic tax credit aspect of it. So Congress right now is in the middle of trying to negotiate a COVID relief bill. There has been a lot of movement on COVID relief. The House passed the HEROES Act. They also passed a infrastructure bill that had pandemic-related provisions in it. So their House and Senate are trying to strike a deal right now for this, what many call the final COVID bill. In the House infrastructure bill, there was pandemic-related provisions, specifically a bump up in the historic tax credit from 20% to 30%, and that there is a good chance that this could be included into the final COVID relief bill, but it's going to take some advocacy. And we encourage you to reach out to your senators and tell them how important this is and how historic tax credit projects have been impacted by the pandemic, and what bumping the historic tax credit from 20% to 30% would for your project.
Thanks, Mike. And just for some background, also, I'll add a little color about the Main Street America ask. We are seeking $100 million from Congress through the Economic Development Administration. Neither HEROES nor HEALS included money for EDA, but we are pushing along with partners at IEDC and NATO to have more money included broadly for the Economic Development Administration, and then a specific plus up to an existing program so that Main Street would have the opportunity to apply in a competitive grant process to fund our coordinating programs and small businesses through specific grants to make COVID-related improvements. We currently have, if you visit mainstreet.org/speakupformainstreet, a sign-up form where you can add your name to contact your congressional delegation, and then we'll, of course, be in contact with areas of the country where you have direct action needed to target specific individuals. And we also encourage everyone out there, if you have connections, specific kind of, there's the grassroots organizing, but there's also the grass tops organizing. If you have specific connections to legislators and can get this proposal in their hands, it's greatly appreciated at this time because the package is moving fast, as Mike also indicated. Just another question for the group as well. I just want to get your sense of what is, in your mind, the biggest either mistake or kind of thing left on the table that organizations aren't doing to engage everyone they could when they're thinking about their advocacy outreach?
You know, one thing that no one's mentioned that maybe we should talk about is, I asked this of my peers at National Preservation Partners Network one time. I asked the other executive directors, who contributes to political people, you know, and it was very interesting. Some people wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and other people were very engaged. And so I've just slipped into it. It's not like I have a lot of money, but I found that making a political contribution puts me higher up in the Rolodex. Is that a way to put it? And I think at the same time, sometimes you can go on the list and you can look and see who has been political donors to a particular campaign, and you can call them and say, hey, John Smith, I see that you're a supporter of Senator X, and we're really trying to reach out to him about historic tax credits, whatever the issue might be. So there's both sides of it. Using people who are known donors, who could be maybe a stronger advocate, who are friendly but aren't a champion of your topic. And then you've got to think about you yourself. And I'd love to hear what they have to say too about whether or not you should make political contributions to particular candidates to kind of get their attention.
I also, there's a great resource that I like from the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy. They have this Power Moves assessment, and it talks about how to meaningfully build power, wield power, and share power within organizations. So I talked a little bit before about broadening your base and bringing in the younger generation. And I think sometimes when we're putting together a team to go visit Capitol Hill, that, you know, we want the perfect people who are going to say the perfect thing and say all the right buzzwords. But as Joyce mentioned, the legislators want genuine, authentic stories. So that's okay if you know, they go on a little long sometimes, or they don't say the exact buzzwords that, you know, a lobbyist with a capital L would use. But having genuine sharing of airtime and you know, sharing that power of communication, I think is something that sometimes we struggle with, just being so scripted, because we want to make sure, you know, this is our one chance for preservation, but we really need to think, are we reaching other people? Are we sharing all the stories that need to be shared?
I would say the biggest mistake that I have seen is that this assumption that other people are going to carry things across the finish line, and that my role my voice maybe isn't that important, and there's a lot of really important people weighing in on this issue, and you know, they'll take care of it. And I think that is just, it's stinking thinking. No other way around it. You got to have the numbers to push a policy forward, and they have to hear from diverse groups. And offices say, do you have anybody except for XYZ who cares about this issue? Because they hear the same people weighing in. So as Joyce and Brianna are saying, widen that group of people and make sure that they are weighing in. And if you have been silent, thinking that others are going to carry it across the finish line, you need to engage, because that's going to help the whole effort all across the board. And also make sure that you're making the ask, that you're not just sending information and not making a request. A request demands an answer, so make sure a request is given.
That's such great advice. I think different and wonderful from each of you. So I greatly appreciate all of your participation today in our program. And as we reach the conclusion here, as we are running short on time, I just want to make sure that everybody here recognizes the opportunity to keep talking about these issues via Forum Connect or the Main Street member network, The Point. So you can use either or both of those forums to keep chatting about these advocacy issues and how best to formulate your grassroots outreach. And just to make sure that you are also aware of where to follow up with us, get more information on both the Preservation Leadership Forum and Main Street America Institute. We have our email addresses there. If you have any further questions or outreach, we can direct this to our speakers if you do want to follow up with any issues or questions for them. So thank you so much to Mike, Joyce, and Brianna for being with us today. Invaluable information was shared, and we're so appreciative of your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
With that, we will close out our program today. I will remind you to please use the Main Street .inreachce.com account to complete the quiz and the evaluation that covers the entire 5 sessions of this program. We would love your feedback and understand how to improve going forward. And we will follow up with you about further opportunities through the Institute and Preservation Leadership Forum. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.